Blackhawks training camp kicks off tomorrow, and we finally know the official 53-player roster. Plus, Lukas Reichel trade rumors have started to swirl again.
You're Locked On Blackhawks, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's happening, Blackhawks fans? Welcome on in to another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Jack Bushman, also Blackhawks beat writer for Chicago Hockey Now. You can check me out on X at Jack Bushman too, but make sure to follow my strictly Blackhawks account at Talkin' Hockey so you don't miss out on any of the latest Blackhawks news and updates. Also got to let you know real quick that today's episode is sponsored by FanDuel. Go and download the FanDuel app now or visit FanDuel.com to get $300 worth of bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. All right, happy Wednesday, everyone. We're now just one day away from the festivities kicking off at Fifth Third Arena. Could not be more excited to get down there and see the boys back in action. And as I mentioned off the jump, the Blackhawks yesterday finally announced their 53-player roster for training camp. So we got lots to break down here on today's show as I want to dive into each and every notable member listed on the roster. But before I do that, first wanted to get into a couple of key details as well. Like I mentioned, training camp starts tomorrow, September 18th, and will be running through Saturday, October 4th, ahead of the Blackhawks' final preseason contest against the St. Louis Blues. And the 53-player roster, just because the sheer number of bodies, right, is going to be splitting into three groups right off the jump. Group 3 will actually be the first group to hit the ice tomorrow morning at 8:30 a.m. Then Group 1 will be up next at 9:30 a.m. Kyle Davidson will be holding a media availability at 11 a.m. So get ready for a lot of quotes coming your way on social media tomorrow. And then last, Group 2 will be hitting the ice at 11:40 a.m. And the Blackhawks looks like they're expected to keep rolling with three groups up until their preseason opener against the Detroit Red Wings, which is just 6 days away, believe it or not, Blackhawks fans. Next Tuesday, there will be Blackhawks hockey going down up at Little Caesars Arena in Detroit. Could not be more excited for things to get underway. But before I dive into all the notables on the Blackhawks training camp roster, a couple of other players I wanted to mention specifically here. Two injured players listed on the roster, one being 2024 sixth-round pick Ty Henry, who unfortunately suffered a left ankle injury while scrimmaging at rookie camp last week. Did not look good, went foot first into the boards. Hoping all the best for Henry. Don't really have much of an update as of now, other than he missed the Tom Curvers Prospect Showcase this weekend and has a star next to his name on the roster being listed as an injured player. The other injured player listed on the Blackhawks roster, unsurprisingly, is Laurent Brossoit, who, there were some rumors in recent weeks that, maybe the Blackhawks, if Brossoit is healthy, they could go with three goaltenders on their opening night roster. And, Brossoit obviously missed all of last season while recovering from knee surgery. Feels like he should be healthy at this point in time. Still, obviously, we haven't heard from Kyle Davidson yet, so we don't know precisely what's going on with him, but listed as an injured player once again on the Blackhawks roster, been MIA for his entire Blackhawks tenure, basically, and I still cannot believe that in my bold predictions episode, which, by the way, I'll be dropping a Blackhawks bold prediction show here in just a couple of days' time, but in last year's Blackhawks bold predictions, one of them that I gave out was that Laurent Brossoit is going to grab the number one goaltender spot for the Hawks and run with it. Well, obviously, he hasn't even got an opportunity to play in a regular season game, let alone a preseason game, let alone a practice. I mean, this guy, I don't know what's going on with him, but doesn't look like the Blackhawks are expecting him to be healthy to open up training camp here tomorrow. Also, Wyatt Kaiser wasn't listed with the one star like Brossoit and Ty Henry were. He got the double star listed as a player that's not currently under contract. And of course, Kaiser as an RFA, he and the Blackhawks have still yet to agree to a deal, as I've been bringing up constantly day in and day out here on the show. Still believe they want to reach a deal before training camp begins tomorrow. I'm just constantly checking my phone, checking my emails, waiting for updates from the Blackhawks or from a source around the NHL. Nothing's happened as of this time, but of course, when I really do believe it's a when situation, Kaiser signs his contract with the Blackhawks. I'll break down all the details here on today's show. I do think it's a good sign that, Kaiser was at least listed by the Blackhawks, despite him technically not being under contract for them right now. But obviously, yeah, at this point in time, two sides haven't worked out a deal, but at the very least, Kaiser was listed. But to kick things off on the Blackhawks training camp roster, I broke things into three groups, naturally, the forwards, the defensemen, and the goaltenders. Starting with the heftiest group of the three here, the forwards. Want to go through each and every forward that was listed on the roster and just have a brief statement about them real quick. Joey Anderson, going in alphabetical order here, who quite honestly, I almost had forgotten is still with the Blackhawks a little bit. Real outside chance he makes the NHL roster out of training camp, maybe, as an extra. The Blackhawks could prefer to want to utilize him as a 13th or 14th forward instead one of their young guys, but that's really his only path into the NHL out of camp. Then, of course, Connor Bedard, we know he's going to be locked into that top line center spot. Nathan Bem, who I thought had a really good first showing with the Blackhawks this weekend at the Tom Curvers Prospect Showcase after being a third-round selection. He's on the training camp roster. Tyler Bertuzzi, who's in his second year with the Blackhawks. Andrei Burakovsky, one of the few offseason additions made by Kyle Davidson this summer. Jackson Cates, AHLer for the Hawks organization. Colton Dock is among the forwards. Jason Dickinson, Ryan Donato, two key pieces of the NHL squad, along with Nick Foligno. Ryan Green is going to be buzzing for an NHL roster spot. Gavin Hayes, likely to open up the year with the Rockford Ice Hogs. Parker Holmes, fourth-round selection for the Blackhawks in this year's draft, wasn't really noticeable whatsoever, in my opinion, at the Prospect Showcase over the weekend. Going to be returning to junior hockey, but gets a couple of more days, or a couple of days of experience around some NHL guys. Sam Lafferty, who's back once again with the Blackhawks for technically his third stint, but only the second time he'll be putting on a Blackhawks sweater, of course. Nick Lardis, going to be gunning for an NHL roster spot as well, but feels like it's going to be complicated for him to do. Paul Ludwinski, kind of a disappointing start to his professional career. He'll be opening things up with the Rockford Ice Hogs. Then we got Ilya Mikheyev, who I really believe was maybe the most underappreciated member of the Blackhawks last year. I thought he had a really good start to his Blackhawks tenure. Martin Misiak, former second-round pick for the Blackhawks in 2023, now on the professional scene, going to be opening up with the Rockford Ice Hogs. Then we got Oliver Moore, who, like Ryan Green, joined on with the Blackhawks late last season, going to be trying to make that NHL roster. Feels like at this point in time, he has a leg up over Ryan Green, considering the performance he had in the opening game, scoring the overtime winner and being one of the more noticeable prospects on the ice. Frank Nazar, we know he's going to be a staple of this team for a long, long time after signing that 7-year contract extension this summer. Super stoked to see what Frank has in store for us all here this season. Jack Pridham, who's one of my favorite sneaky, underrated prospects in the pipelines, going to be returning to junior, but excited to see maybe him get a couple of games of preseason action. Lucas Reichel, who I'll be talking about more in segment 3. Make sure to stick around for that, Blackhawks fans. Samuel Savoie, another underappreciated prospect, I think, in the Blackhawks pipelines. And because of his unique makeup and what he brings to the table, never shying away from contact and getting into skirmishes, mixing it up, stepping in for his teammates. And he also, I think, provides more skill than he gets credit for. Not that he's going to be like a top sixer or anything. And likely if he were to make the NHL, it's down there on the fourth line. But I do think that's a possibility for Samuel Savoie. Brett Seney, Rockford Ice Hogs captain, listed on the roster. Landon Slaggert, who's trying to make the NHL out of camp. AJ Spellacy, who just continues to impress every time we see the kid. Teuvo Teravainen, back for his second year with the Blackhawks. Aiden Thompson, now a full-time professional after spending 3 seasons with Denver. Dominic Toninato, offseason addition by the Blackhawks. And then last but certainly not least, 2024 late first-round selection, Marek Vanacker. Those are the 30 forwards that were listed on the Blackhawks roster here this year. I broke them down, though, next into an NHL aspirations group of 18. Obviously, each and every one of these guys, has a dream of making the NHL out of camp, but it's only realistic for so many players. And I think you can cut it down to 18 who realistically have a chance of making the NHL roster. The first, as I mentioned, Joey Anderson, I think a very outside chance. And the only way it does is if he's being utilized as one of the extras. We know Connor Bedard's a lock. We know Tyler Bertuzzi's a lock. Same with Andre Burakovsky. Colton Dach, he's right there on the bubble. Has a lot to prove here during training camp in the preseason these next couple of weeks. Jason Dickinson's a roster lock. Same with Ryan Donato. Same with Nick Foligno. Ryan Green's right there on the bubble. Sam Lafferty's a roster lock. Nick Lardis, I included. Like I said, more likely that he begins in Rockford, but who knows? Maybe he shows the Blackhawks coaching staff enough to keep him around. I'm not completely ruling it out, although it is admittedly unlikely. Ilya Mikheyev, he's going to be an NHL roster lock. Oliver Moore, like I said, right there with Ryan Green, but I think he has the leg up. Frank Nazar's an NHLer. Lukas Reichel, if he doesn't wind up getting traded by the Blackhawks before the season begins, he's going to be part of the NHL group. Landon Slaggert, I feel like he and Colton Dach, one or the other, is probably going to be on the opening night roster. Then we got Teuvo Teravainen, who's a lock, and Dominic Toninato, who in a similar mold to Joey Anderson could be utilized as one of the extras, but feels more likely than not to begin the season down in Rockford. Out of those 18 forwards, you probably expect the Blackhawks to keep 14. Not that they have to. They could only keep 13 if they want to, but 14 is usually what you see, the 12 in the lineup, then a couple of extras. Out of those 18 players that I just went through, the 4 that I think are most in jeopardy of not making the NHL roster are Joey Anderson, Dominic Toninato, Nick Lardis, and Ryan Green. I think those are the 4 most likely to open up the season down in the AHL, but obviously things can change here throughout training camp, but that's just kind of the way I'm picturing it as the Blackhawks are set to open up action down at Fifth Third Arena. There's my thoughts on the Blackhawks forward group on the roster, but coming up in just a minute, don't miss out on my breakdown of all the defensemen and the goaltenders as well. But first, got to talk to you all about one of today's sponsors, which is Monarch Money. Most people can't name all of their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. And that's why there is Monarch Money, an all-in-one personal finance tool, that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, super easy to use interface, both on your laptop and on your phone. And Monarch does all of the heavy lifting for you so that you can link all of your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever having to touch a spreadsheet. So don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks any longer. Go and use our promo code LOCKEDONNHL in all caps at monarchmoney.com, and you'll also get 50% off on your first year. Again, that's half off on your first year at monarchmoney.com when you use our promo code LOCKEDONNHL in all caps. Segment 2, picking up where I left off and diving into the 17 defensemen that were listed on the Blackhawks training camp roster. Again, going in alphabetical order here first. Nolan Allen, 2021, a late first-round selection for the Blackhawks, trying to make the NHL roster, but feels like he's got several players ahead of him at this point. Louis Crevier inked a deal with the Blackhawks this summer that suggests they want him to be a part of their NHL roster, likely as a 7th defenseman or maybe in that 6th defenseman role, depending on how things go for a right-handed defenseman like Artem Levshinov over these next couple of weeks, who I'll get to here in just a second, as well as a guy who the Blackhawks signed on a PTO yesterday. Ashton Kumbie, next up, 2024, 5th-round selection for the Blackhawks, going to be heading back to the Seattle Thunderbirds in the WHL. Ethan Del Mastro, I think, is going to be a full-time NHLer that right off the jump, but we're going to have to wait and see. Kevin Fitzgerald, part of the AHL group for Rockford. Matt Grzelcyk is the man I'm referring to, who signed the PTO with the Blackhawks yesterday, which kind of makes things a little bit, hard to gauge exactly what Kyle Davidson is thinking on the back end by that move. But again, we're going to find out when the Hawks hit the ice tomorrow. Tage Harding, who I thought had a pretty decent showing with the Blackhawks at the Tom Curvers Prospect Showcase, played along with Sam Rinzel on the top pairing on Saturday night. And Rinzel, undoubtedly was the more noticeable of the two. But I also think Harding held his own for the most part and didn't make any real like bad blunders or anything, and used his long reach to his advantage a couple of times specifically. Ty Henry listed on the roster, but of course injured at this point, like I alluded to in segment 1. Wyatt Kaiser mentioned with 2 stars next to his name because he does not currently have a contract, but is listed among the defensemen. Kevin Korchinski, former 7th overall pick not all that long ago, feels like he's going to be starting off the season in Rockford once again, but things still have to be played out these next couple of weeks for a reason. Dmitry Kuzmin did not think he had a real good showing over the weekend in Minnesota. Going to be with Rockford once again. Don't really think he has much of an NHL future personally. Artem Levshinov, I talked about him a little bit yesterday. I just wonder if the addition of Matt Grzelcyk, and considering Kyle Davidson doesn't give out PTOs all too frequently, I just wonder if that could perhaps mean he's not starting the NHL season with the Blackhawks. Obviously, they still have room on the right-hand side. Grzelcyk is a natural left-handed defenseman, and if Levshinov performs well throughout training camp in the preseason, I do still think he's going to start with the Blackhawks. But like I mentioned, the addition of Matt Grzelcyk just makes things a little bit murkier. Then we also got Ryan Mast, who scored a goal for the Blackhawks on Saturday against St. Louis. He'll begin with the Rockford Ice Hogs. Connor Murphy, the real veteran dad of the Blackhawks blue line these days, entering the final year of his contract. Andrew Perrott, who filled in for Ty Henry over the weekend at the Prospect Showcase. Then we got, oh my goodness, Sam Rinzel, who I cannot wait to see how he's going to look with a full season ahead of him in Chicago. Really believe he's going to be an NHLer right out of the gate. And then last but certainly not least, we got potentially his top pairing partner right out of the gate is Alex Vlasic. Of those 17 defensemen, I broke it down into a group of 10 who realistically, like I said, have NHL aspirations. Nolan Allen is one of them, but I don't expect him to make it at this point. I think Rockford is where he's going to be beginning just because of the number of left-handed defensemen that are ahead of him, in addition to another one being added just yesterday. Louis Crevier, like I said, the contract that he got, he'd have to clear waivers in order to go to Rockford. I think he's going to be part of the NHL group. Then you got Ethan Del Mastro, who I think maybe not as strongly as Wyatt Kaiser did, but pretty much proved to us that he's ready for a full-time NHL role. I think he's going to be part of the group right out of the gate. Then we got Matt Grzelcyk, if he winds up signing an NHL contract with Chicago, which, by the way, is not guaranteed, but we know he's going to be an NHLer. Then we got Wyatt Kaiser, if he signs a contract, but like I mentioned in segment 1, I think that's a when situation truly, even though we are, getting down there in terms of time before camp begins. Then we also got Artem Levshinov, who I mentioned has a lot to prove, I think, over these next couple of weeks, but still feel he's more likely than not to open things up in the NHL. Connor Murphy, he's going to be an NHLer. Same with Sam Rinzel and same with Alex Vlasic. So I think the 3 of the 10, because obviously 7 are what the Blackhawks are going to be bringing with them to Florida for their regular season opener on October 7th. I think the 3 that are likely going to be starting down in the AHL, Nolan Allen, Kevin Korchinski, and then because Matt Grzelcyk is such a wild card, it makes it real tough for me to select that third defenseman. It's either probably going to be Ethan Del Mastro or Artem Levshinov. Again, it's not a guarantee or a certainty that Grzelcyk is going to get an NHL contract, but if he does, he's going to be part of the NHL group. And I don't think Louis Crevier, they, like I said, want to risk losing him for free by putting him through waivers. They gave him a contract this past summer for a reason. Then there's Wyatt Kaiser, who could also potentially be in that group. But between Kaiser and Ethan Del Mastro on the left-hand side, I think Kaiser is the more proven commodity of the two and the more likely of the two to begin the season up in the NHL. So to me, if Grzelcyk signs an NHL deal, it's down to either Artem Levshinov or Ethan Del Mastro going back down to the AHL. And well, Del Mastro, like I mentioned yesterday, he could use some more seasoning down in the AHL. I don't really think there's a lot left for him to prove at that level, and he's also the far older of the 2 prospects for the Blackhawks. If they were to be scratching or using one of these 2 guys as a 7th defenseman or rotating someone in, who would you rather have out of the lineup every now and then, Ethan Del Mastro or Artem Levshinov? So that kind of, again, goes to my thinking of, well, if Matt Grzelcyk actually does get an NHL deal, is Artem Levshinov, does he wind up being the odd man out? Again, there's no guarantee that Grzelcyk is getting an NHL deal, and I'm not saying it's for sure going to be Artem Levshinov that's going down. It could very well be Ethan Del Mastro that's just my thought process when breaking down this complicated Blackhawks blue line as a whole that didn't get any easier by the potential addition of Matt Grzelcyk. And then, last but certainly not least, the 6 goaltenders that were listed on the roster, 5 of them healthy. First, we got Stanislav Bereznoy, who I thought was really excellent on Saturday to really help backstop the Blackhawks to a 3-2 OT win. Probably don't win that game without him playing as well as he did. Likely going to be the backup goaltender to begin the season with the Rockford Ice Hogs. Then we got the injured MIA, put him on the milk carton, put him on a poster, Laurent Brossoit. He's wanted. I don't know where the guy is. I don't know what's been going on. We don't have any real updates, but we know he's not going to be on the ice come tomorrow at Fifth Third Arena. Then we got Drew Commesso, who's going to be the starter ahead of Stanislav Bereznoy with Rockford this year. And I'm really interested to see, there's obviously no rush to bring Commesso up to the NHL level, but now that they gave Soderblom a 2-year extension, it makes it obviously, Spencer Knight just signed a 3-year deal. That makes things more complicated for Drew Commesso getting that first real NHL call-up. Now, injuries happen. Soderblom's had a lot of ups and downs in his career that could create a path for Drew Commesso, but it got a little tougher for him, and I still think he has NHL capabilities as Spencer Knight's backup potentially. Speaking of Spencer Knight, he's the 4th goaltender listed on the Blackhawks roster, fresh off signing a new 3-year deal. Then there's Arvid Soderblom, who's most likely to be his backup, and then there's Mitchell Weeks, who's going to serve once again as a depth goaltender down in the AHL. Blackhawks goaltender picture is pretty simple considering Laurent Brossoit is not healthy. It's going to be Spencer Knight in the number 1 spot, Arvid Soderblom as his backup. Comesso's going to be the one in Rockford. Bereznoy is going to be the number 2. Mitchell Weeks will be as a depth option there. Maybe we'll see Owen Flores after an incredible showing on Sunday against Minnesota. Maybe he'll get some action with the Ice Hogs this year, but it's going to be really tough to do with 2. Bereznoy, obviously it's going to be tough for him to have a future here, but he looks like a promising young goaltender considering how he looked in his first bit of action this weekend, and also the 2 consistent seasons he put together over in Russia's VHL at, 20 and 21 years of age. So those guys are obviously going to be the priority over Mitchell Weeks, either over Owen Flores, but pretty, solid Blackhawks goaltender group that Kyle Davidson has put together here. There's still Adam Guyan in college hockey who, I know his freshman season didn't get off to the best start last year, but still has a long ways to go before he's even hitting the professional scene. And then as I talked about in segment 3 yesterday, Ilya Konarski, who, yes, is a 7th round pick. Very small chance he winds up playing NHL games with the Blackhawks, but what a start to the season he's off to over in Russia's VHL. But that's going to take care of my full breakdown on the Blackhawks 2025 training camp roster. Coming up in just a moment here, Blackhawks fans, I'll quickly break down the Lukas Reichel trade rumors that have started to pick up once again. But first, I do got to let you all know about one of today's other sponsors, which is FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Because right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use all across the app. And what I personally love about FanDuel is that it's super quick, it's easy, and the best way to add a little bit more energy to your Sundays. With player props, same-game parlays, and more ways than ever to now get in on the action. Are you ready to play? All you got to do is download the FanDuel app or visit FanDuel.com today in order to get started. Again, that's FanDuel.com or the FanDuel app to place your first $5 bet and win $300 worth of bonus bets when it wins. Real quick, just wanted to say thank you to everyone for making Locked On Blackhawks your very first listen here to start off your day. For your second listen, make sure to go and check out the Locked On NHL podcast, where there is no off season, bringing you the daily league-wide stories that matter the most with the local coverage you love from Locked On. And you can easily find Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you may be listening to your podcasts. Segment 3, the rumors around Lukas Reichel Blackhawks fans have picked up once again, as Elliot Friedman on 32 Thoughts last week mentioned that he thinks Lukas Reichel is once again available, saying, quote, "I think it's understood that the Blackhawks are willing to make the move if they find a trade partner, and I think the player understands that it might be time to," close quote. And as I've talked about a couple of times throughout the summer, more specifically when I went through my way too early projections of the Blackhawks forward group, probably a little over a month now at this point in time, I broke down, the top sixers, the bottom sixers, and I kind of wanted to bring that up here again today. Just looking at the projected top six, we still have to figure out exactly what the first line's going to be, exactly what the second line's going to be, but we have a pretty good sense of who's going to be in the top six to open things up for Chicago. Connor Bedard, Tyler Bertuzzi, Andre Burakovsky, Ryan Donato, Frank Nazar, and Teuvo Teravainen. I think that's a pretty clear-cut top six. Outside of those guys, maybe Ilya Mikheyev because he fared well with Connor Bedard last year, but I think more naturally is a third-line checking role kind of player. Nick Lardis, who I brought up in the forward group, a guy with perhaps legitimate NHL aspirations, thought he had, even though he didn't score a goal, a good showing at the Tom Curvers Prospect Showcase, but again, don't really see it happening. And then Lukas Reichel would be the only other guy who could potentially go into the top six, but it would, again, mean one of those six guys that I just mentioned, Bedard, Bertuzzi, Burakovsky, Donato, Nazar, Teravainen, one of them have to fall down the lineup. And while that's not completely out of the picture, it could happen. It didn't happen late last year. I know Jeff Blashill, new head coach, is stepping in. Maybe, Reichel finally gets that look, but it's just hard to expect it considering a lot of us Blackhawks fans have been wanting it for so long, and he's never really been given that true opportunity. And it's just kind of hard to forecast him getting that spot when things open up tomorrow. So that's why, I'm not surprised to see Lukas Reichel still on the trade block, apparently, because when he's played in a bottom six role along with, guys like Nick Foligno, Jason Dickinson, even though there's going to be more skill and speed down there, potentially with someone like Oliver Moore, Ilya Mikheyev, I think has a really good, well-rounded game and plays with good pace. Colton Dach could potentially be on the roster, right? Landon Slag. There's more talent than there has been in recent years, but that's still not a natural spot for Lukas Reichel, at least the way that Lukas Reichel has gone about his business in his first couple NHL seasons. I know he made it a priority this year to get a little bit stronger, and I really believe he has to in order to, get to the spots he wants to get to in order to score goals and make those nice passes and those highlight reel type of plays. He struggles so much in winning battles, and he's just an undersized, honestly, just a little bit of a soft player, and he definitely needs to toughen up and be harder on his stick and win more battles if, he wants to be a true NHLer, because it's hard to see him at this point being a long-term top six kind of guy, and he just hasn't found a way to maximize or really do anything with his opportunities down there in the bottom six. And are the Blackhawks, even though they do have a new head coach coming in, are they really going to trot him out in that spot again and expect him to have success? It's just kind of hard to imagine. So that's why I think it's been, pretty clear all offseason that Lukas Reichel, he's available for another NHL team. I think the real holdup in getting a Lukas Reichel deal done, and by the way, I think Lukas Reichel, it's such a tough situation because, again, I don't see a spot for him in the top six, but I do feel like while he's under contract here as a former first-round pick, he's got 1 year left. You might as well give him an opportunity with a new head coach to see if he finds that spark. I just wouldn't trade him I wouldn't sell low on him right now for, like a third or fourth round pick. And it feels like a third round pick is probably what the going rate would be for Lukas Reichel, considering the real lack of development these last couple of years. And the Blackhawks don't need that third round pick, right? The prospect pool is as deep as it is. It's about quality over quantity at this point in time. And we've heard all summer that KD has been trying to upgrade this team, which has kind of annoyed me a little bit because I do think he could have done more than just bringing in Andre Burakovsky to the top six here this summer, but that's neither here nor there. The Blackhawks have been trying to bring in, real NHL help, and I just think it's hard to find a team who's willing to give up a real NHLer to take a gamble on someone like Lukas Reichel. So that's why I'm still not really expecting a deal to get done here, but certainly not out of the realm of possibility. Elliot Friedman's reporting that, it's understood that the Blackhawks are willing to make a move if they find an adequate trade partner. I think it's easier said than done at this point in time, but we'll see if something were to transpire. It would probably happen over the next week or so, but that's going to take care of today's episode of Locked On Blackhawks, everyone. As always, thank you all again for joining me on the show. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't done so already. Follow Locked On Blackhawks for free wherever you may be listening to your podcasts. I'm your host, Jack Bushman. Follow me on X at Jack Bushman too, but make sure to check out my Strictly Blackhawks account at Talkin' Hockey for all the latest Blackhawks news and updates. Until tomorrow's episode, everyone, enjoy the rest of your days. I'll see you next time on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.